Hello again, everyone. Tonight's story follows Nora, a daughter reborn before illness and heartbreak can destroy her again. Because sometimes a second life is not about punishing those who failed you, but about choosing yourself, building a new home, and learning who truly stays. I woke to sunlight I knew too well. It came through the curtains in two pale bands, one across the bed and one across the dresser where I kept coins, ties, and keys. Outside, a car coughed to life. Somewhere in the wall, the old pipes clicked. For several seconds, I did not move. I knew this ceiling, the faint water stain above the light fixture, the mattress that dipped on the left, the cheap lemon detergent on my sheets. I knew the quiet of my apartment on a Sunday morning. I also knew I had died. Not emotionally, not symbolically. My body had given up in a hospital bed at St. Albans Medical Center with antiseptic in the air, a monitor ticking beside me, and a nurse named Elise holding my hand because no one with my blood was there. I remembered my fingers turning paper dry. I remembered each breath becoming a task I kept failing. I never asked for much. Then there had been nothing. And then there was sunlight. My right hand moved first. I pressed it flat to my chest, hard enough to feel the rhythm beneath my ribs. It was not the thin, uneven flutter I remembered from the end. It was strong, ordinary, insistent. My heart beat as if it had no idea it was supposed to have stopped. My phone lay on the pillow beside me. When I touched the screen, it lit. Sunday, May 17th. 3 years before the Tuesday in March. 3 years before the phone call. 3 years before my mother told me Ivy needed her more. At the top of my notifications sat a text from Margaret. Mom, dinner tonight? Ivy's making her pasta. I stared until the words blurred. Ivy's pasta meant my mother's kitchen, floral plates, my younger sister barefoot on the tile, and somehow using every pan in the house. It meant Margaret looking at Ivy with the helpless softness she reserved for messes she mistook for tenderness. I had gone that night the first time. I had brought wine, helped clean, praised the sauce, and stayed late to assemble Ivy's bookshelf. I remembered Margaret kissing Ivy's temple and saying, "What would we do without Nora?" It had been praise. It had also been a job description. Before we return to the story, I just want to share a quick note. This version is made for YouTube, but the extended, very hot, and uncensored Reborn romance stories will be available on my Patreon. Some scenes go deeper into desire, passion, and the private moments between the characters. And those parts are too bold to include here. If you want the fuller and hotter version, you can find the details in the description below. I placed the phone face down on the mattress. I did not scream. Grief had already spent its loudness on me in another life. What remained was colder and cleaner. I lay there in the body of my 28-year-old self and made two decisions with the terrible simplicity of someone who had seen where hesitation led. I would make a medical appointment that week. I would not wait for my body to become an emergency before I believed it deserved attention. And I would say nothing. Not to my mother, not to Ivy, not to my father, who loved me vaguely, like a man fond of a houseplant someone else watered. When the moment came again, I would not beg my mother to choose me. I would give her the choice, and then I would remember what she did with it. I got out of bed on legs that felt both mine and borrowed. In the bathroom mirror, I found a woman I had not expected to see again. My hair was dark brown and tangled from sleep. My face was thin from ordinary stress, not illness. Not yet. I washed my face and watched water run down the sink. For one foolish second, I wanted to thank the faucet, the towel, the ugly green toothbrush, every object that had waited patiently in a life I had already lost. Then my phone buzzed again. Mom, you coming? Ivy's excited. Ivy was often excited by the idea of people gathering to witness her. I did not hate my sister. That would have been easier. She could be bright, funny, generous in bursts. She could also swallow all the oxygen in a room without noticing anyone else had lungs. I typed back, I'll come for a little while. A little while. 3 words I had not known how to use before. Then I opened my laptop and searched for gynecologic oncologists within 20 miles of my apartment. My hands were steady until they were not. The first appointment I could get was 9 days later with Dr. Priya Sen at a women's health clinic connected to St. Albans. The hospital name made my stomach turn, but I booked it anyway because fear was not a compass. Fear had led me to silence once. I filled out the forms online with the efficiency I used when panic needed furniture. Family history? No known ovarian cancer. Symptoms? Occasional pelvic pressure, fatigue, irregular cycles. I had ignored those things in my first life because I had been busy, and busy women are praised for mistaking self-neglect for discipline. I had said, it's probably stress. I had said, I'll make an appointment after this project deadline. Another deadline always came. That night, I went to dinner. Margaret Caldwell opened the front door before I knocked twice. She was 58 then, soft-cheeked and careful, with hands that always smelled faintly of vanilla lotion and dish soap. She hugged me in the entryway. "Nora," she said, "you look tired." I slept badly. "You work too much. Come in. Ivy's in one of her moods." One of Ivy's moods could mean anything, from delighted to inconsolable. That evening, it meant dramatic. She stood in the kitchen in a red sundress, explaining that Grant had called her impossible. Margaret listened as if my sister were describing a natural disaster. "There she is," Ivy cried, kissing my cheek and leaving tomato near my jaw. My favorite responsible adult. I'm your only responsible adult. Scarcity increases value. I laughed because she was funny. That was the trap. People who hurt you were rarely unbearable all the time. Dinner unfolded almost exactly as I remembered. Ivy told the story of her latest fight with Grant, who had apparently failed to understand that fine meant, please ask me 7 more questions. Margaret listened as if my sister were describing a natural disaster. "That boy has never known how to read you," she said. "He said I was impossible." "You are sensitive." "I am," Ivy said, vindicated. Margaret looked at me. "Nora, tell her. She isn't impossible." In my first life, I had said what was required. "Of course you're not impossible, Ivy. Grant just needs to communicate better." It had cost me nothing and helped build everything. This time, I set down my fork. "I think people can be sensitive and still be difficult to date." The table quieted. Dad looked at me over his glass, mildly alarmed, as if the houseplant had spoken. Ivy recovered first. "Rude, but fair." She pointed her fork at me. "This is why I need you. You're emotionally brutal in a cardigan." I was wearing a cardigan. It seemed important, absurdly, that even her jokes knew me only as an outline. After dinner, Ivy announced she was too full and emotionally depleted to help clean. My hand reached automatically for her plate, following the old choreography: clear, rinse, wipe, fix, vanish. Then I let my hand fall. "I'm going to head out," I said. Margaret turned. "Already? But you just got here." "I have an early morning. It's Sunday." "I know." I kissed her cheek, hugged Dad, waved to Ivy, and left before dessert. In the car, I sat with both hands on the steering wheel and cried for less than a minute. Not because I had won anything, but because leaving early felt like violence. That was how thoroughly I had been trained. 9 days later, Dr. Sen told me we had caught something concerning. She was a small woman with silver-threaded black hair and a calm voice that did not dramatize or dilute. She explained blood work, imaging, risk, options. She used words like early and treatable. She said we would move quickly, but not frantically. I nodded. I asked good questions. I wrote things down. When she asked if I had someone who could come with me to future appointments, I looked at the pen in my hand. "I'm working on that," I said. It was not a lie. It was an intention. The first year of my second life became a series of quiet, private acts of choosing myself. I scheduled tests, attended follow-ups, adjusted my work calendar with military precision, and told my firm I had a medical condition that required treatment, and no, I did not want to discuss details. "Take the time," he said. "You run 3 projects better at half capacity than most people do at full. Just don't disappear on us." "I'm not disappearing." "Good. And Nora, you're allowed to be a person here." I nearly hated him for saying it kindly. I did not tell my family. At first, it was not revenge, it was preservation. In my first life, the knowledge of my illness had become something they handled badly, and I survived alone. In this one, I wanted scaffolding before I tested the weight. I reconnected with Danny in June. Danny Alvarez had been my closest friend in college, a city planner now, all sharp eyeliner and fierce competence. We had drifted because adulthood is full of slow thefts. When I called, she knew from my voice that brunch was not the reason. "Bad joke," I said, closing my eyes. "Can we have coffee sometime?" We met the next day. I told her some of the truth. Not death. Not rebirth. Even I had limits. But I told her I had health issues and was trying not to disappear into them. Danny listened, then squeezed my wrist so hard it hurt. "Okay," she said. "Then we make a plan." Danny became a calendar invite with a heartbeat. She drove me to blood work, bullied me into comfortable shoes, and treated my competence not as proof that I needed less care, but as evidence that I had been carrying too much. In September, I joined a Thursday evening architecture lecture series at the university. I told myself the lecture series was professional development. It was also a place where no one knew my family, my diagnosis, or the shape of my old loneliness. There was something comforting about buildings. No one looked at a bridge and called it needy for requiring support. I met Sebastian Voss after a lecture on seismic retrofitting. He stood near the coffee table, frowning at a paper cup as if it had disappointed him personally. Tall, dark blonde, a narrow scar near his chin, charcoal sweater, notebook full of sketches that looked mathematical, until you noticed how beautifully the lines moved. I reached for a sugar packet at the same time he did. He withdrew his hand. "Please, save yourself." "From the sugar?" "From the coffee. The sugar can't help it now." I looked into my cup. "That bad?" "I'm a structural engineer. I try not to make absolute claims without evidence." He glanced at the urn. "But yes, that bad." I smiled. "Nora Caldwell. Sebastian Voss. Are you always this grim about beverages?" "Only when they've earned it." That should have been the whole conversation. Instead, we stood there until the lobby emptied, arguing mildly about whether buildings should reveal their reinforcements or conceal them for aesthetic grace. He believed honesty had beauty. I believed beauty often required mercy. "So you're in favor of lying walls," he said. "I'm in favor of not making everyone stare at the bolts. But the bolts are why the building survives." I looked at him then. There was no flirtation in his tone, not exactly. Only attention, which was rarer and more dangerous. "Maybe survival doesn't always want to be on display," I said. His expression changed. He went still in a way that made me feel heard before I had decided to speak. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose it doesn't." The next Thursday, he brought 2 coffees from a cafe 3 blocks away. "I didn't know how you take it," he said. "You brought a stranger coffee without knowing how she takes it?" "I brought a stranger black coffee and 4 sugar packets. I'm not reckless." I laughed, and the sound startled me. It had been a long time since laughter had left me without first asking grief for permission. Our coffees after lectures became routine by accident, then by mutual refusal to admit intention. He asked questions and did something almost no one in my family had ever done. He waded through the first answer to see if there was a truer one underneath. "How was your week?" he asked one evening. "Busy." He stirred his tea. That was the headline. "What's the article?" I stared at him. "Sorry," he said. "Engineer. We like underlying systems." "No, it's fine." I wrapped both hands around my cup. "The article is that I'm tired and pretending not to be, because everyone likes me best when I'm useful." He did not rush to reassure me. He did not say, "But your family loves you. the sentence people use when they want to end a conversation without entering it. He only nodded. That sounds lonely. My throat tightened. It is, I said. He let the answer stand. That was the first warm thing about Sebastian that frightened me. Not kindness. I knew kindness. Strangers held doors. Nurses adjusted pillows. Sebastian's gift was steadiness. He could sit beside pain without demanding it become smaller for his comfort. In November, I had a scan that required contrast dye and the kind of waiting room where every magazine looked touched by nervous hands. Danny had a work emergency. I had planned to go alone. Then, for reasons I could not fully explain, I told Sebastian. He arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a navy coat and carrying a paper bag. I brought crackers, he said. Do I need crackers? I don't know, but people in medical buildings often seem like they might. That was so practical and so tender that I almost turned away. In the prep area, when my fingers turned cold, he took my hand without making a production of it. His palm was warm, dry, a little rough at the base of the thumb. He held on as if holding on were ordinary. You don't have to talk, he said. I wasn't planning to. I noticed. Are you making fun of me in a hospital? Gently. It worked. I breathed. The nurse smiled to herself as she taped the IV in place. That night, after he drove me home and made tea in my kitchen as if he had been doing it for years, I told him, not the impossible part, not death and waking and time folding back like a page, but I told him about the cancer. I told him it had been caught early. I told him I had not told my family. I told him I was afraid. Though the word came out so quietly, I almost pretended it had not. Sebastian stood across from me in the yellow light of my kitchen. When people hear a secret, many immediately try to make room for themselves inside it. They ask why they were not told sooner. They make your pain into a mirror and study their own reflection. Sebastian said, "Thank you for telling me." That was all. Then, after a moment, "What do you need tonight?" I laughed once, poorly. "I don't know. Then I'll make toast." Toast? It's difficult to ruin. You are a man of limited culinary ambition. And yet you're smiling. I was. Barely. But I was. We ate toast at my small kitchen table while rain tapped the window. He did not ask why I had not told my mother. He did not say I should. He only asked what my next appointment was and whether I wanted company. After he left, I stood by the locked door and pressed my fingers against my lips. Not because he had kissed me. He had not. Being cared for had felt so intimate, I needed a moment to recover. Winter came, treatment became part of my life, but not all of it. Fatigue arrived some afternoons like weather. Food tasted wrong for a week at a time. I cut my hair to my shoulders and told Margaret I wanted something easier for work. She frowned over it at Sunday lunch. It's pretty, just different. Ivy touched the ends. You look serious, like you're about to fire someone in a movie. Margaret laughed. She did not ask if something had happened, or perhaps she sensed the edge of a question and turned away from it by habit. Some mothers know when their children are hiding pain. Mine knew when I was hiding something and trusted me to handle it alone. So I began declining invitations. Not all of them. Enough. I missed family dinners when I was tired and stopped answering Ivy's late-night crisis calls on the first ring. Once when she texted, "Are you awake?" "Emergency?" I wrote back. "If you are unsafe, call me." "If this is about Grant, no," she replied with 17 offended messages. I slept through them. The next morning, when I realized the world had not ended because I failed to manage Ivy's feelings in real time, I made coffee and laughed so hard I had to sit down. March arrived like a date circled in invisible ink. I had known it was coming. I knew the Tuesday. I knew the clinic room, the reaction, the way heat would flush through my body, and the nurse would say my name too sharply. I knew the ceiling tiles in the emergency ward. I knew the cold fear of being admitted overnight with no one to call who would come. This time, Sebastian drove me to the infusion center. We had been seeing each other for months by then. He had a toothbrush at my apartment. I had a sweater at his. We had kissed for the first time after a lecture on bridge failures, when he told me most bridges failed because small stresses went unaddressed too long. That is not romantic, I told him. It could be. He leaned down, eyes warm. I'm in favor of addressing stress before collapse. I laughed, and then he kissed me so gently, it felt less like being claimed than being asked. I said yes by staying. On that Tuesday in March, he sat beside my infusion chair reading a paperback while his free hand rested near mine, not touching unless I wanted it to. He had learned the strange etiquette of illness quickly. When to distract, when to be silent, when to step out because dignity sometimes required privacy. The reaction began 27 minutes in. First heat, then dizziness, then my throat tightening with a memory so exact I could not tell which life I was in. Nurses moved. Someone lowered the chair. Sebastian's book hit the floor. He was beside me, calm but pale, saying my name. Nora, look at me. I tried. My vision blurred. I'm here, he said. I've got you. Technically, the nurses had me. The medication had me. The emergency protocol had me. But his voice stayed level, and I followed it through the bright confusion like a handrail. I was transferred to the emergency ward and admitted for observation. Different room than before, same hospital smell, antiseptic, plastic, overheated air, and underneath it all the faint metallic scent of fear. When a nurse asked for my emergency contact, I gave Sebastian's name. Then, once the IV was in and my breathing had settled, I asked for my phone. Sebastian looked at me from the chair beside the bed. You're sure? Yes. He did not ask why. Perhaps he already knew. Perhaps love, when it is careful enough, becomes a kind of witness. Margaret answered on the third ring. Hi, sweetheart. Is everything all right? Sweetheart. The word entered me like a small knife because she meant it. That was always the trouble. Mom, I said. My voice sounded rough, young, and old together. I'm at St. Albans. What do you mean you're at St. Albans? I had a reaction during treatment. Treatment for what? Sebastian's hand rested on the edge of the mattress, waiting. Cancer, I said. Ovarian. It was caught early. I've been in treatment. I didn't tell you. Silence. In my first life, that silence had been a cliff. I had stood at its edge holding my phone, sick and frightened, waiting for my mother to cross the distance. Nora, she whispered, I'm stable right now. They're keeping me overnight. I'm in room 412. Oh my God. Why didn't you tell me? Nora, why would you not tell me something like that? There were 100 true answers. Because I knew you would make my illness into Ivy's trauma. Because needing you had always felt like asking a locked door to become a blanket. I'm telling you now, I said. I'm coming. She said it quickly with force. I'm coming right now. In the background, Ivy's voice rose. Mom, what happened? Margaret covered the phone badly. I heard my sister ask again. I heard my mother say, It's Nora. I heard the word cancer travel through the kitchen like dropped glass. Then Ivy made a sound I remembered from another life. A gasp, a sob, a chair tipping. I have to go, Margaret said breathless. I'm coming, Nora. Your sister. The call ended. I lowered the phone to my lap. For 19 minutes, I watched the doorway. Not because I expected her, because some part of me, the stupidest and most durable part, wanted to be wrong. The phone rang. Mom. Margaret was crying. Nora, honey, I'm so sorry. Ivy heard and she's having a panic attack. A real one. She can't breathe. I think I need to stay with her until she calms down. There it was. Not dramatic, not monstrous. Almost reasonable, if you looked at only 1 inch of it. I see, I said. I'm going to come tomorrow morning. First thing. You're stable, right? You said you were stable. Yes. And you're so strong, Nora. You've always been so strong. I know that's not fair to say right now, but you are. Ivy is just... she's not like you. She doesn't handle things. I looked at the IV taped to my hand. The tape pulled at my skin. Okay, Mom, I said. I understand. A shudder went through her breath. Do you? I feel terrible. I really do. I understand. I'll come tomorrow. I promise. Good night. Nora? I hung up before she could ask me to comfort her for failing me. The room settled around the silence. Sebastian sat across from me, elbows on his knees, his face unreadable in the harsh light. For a long moment, I did not speak because speech would make it real, and it was already real in 2 lifetimes. She chose Ivy, I said finally. I know, he said. No outrage, no speech about how I deserved better, though I did. No attempt to explain Margaret or soften the blow with intentions. He stood, came to the bed, and covered my hand with his. That was enough. I did not cry until after midnight, when the ward had gone quiet and Sebastian had fallen asleep badly in the chair. In the window, the glass reflected a pale woman in a hospital bed and a man staying beside her because showing up, for him, was not an event but a position. In the morning, Margaret arrived at 10:37 with a fruit basket. It was wrapped in clear cellophane and tied with a yellow ribbon, the sort of thing sold in hospital gift shops to people who wanted an object to stand in for presents. Apples, oranges, grapes, and 2 pears hard enough to use as weapons. My mother came in wearing her camel coat and the careful face of a woman who had cried in the car and repaired her makeup in the parking lot. She saw Sebastian first. Oh, she said. Hello. Sebastian Voss, he said, standing. It's nice to meet you. Margaret looked from him to me. I didn't know you were seeing someone. There's a lot you don't know, I said. I did not say it cruelly. That made it worse. She set the fruit basket on the windowsill. It immediately looked absurd there, bright and performative against the gray hospital light. Honey, she said, coming to the bed. She hugged me carefully, as if illness had made me breakable in ways neglect never had. I'm so sorry. I should have been here. Yes, I said. You should have. Her arms tightened. Then she drew back, eyes wet. In my first life, I had softened then. I had said, it's okay. I know Ivy needed you. I had given her the absolution she came to collect because I could not bear seeing my mother ashamed. This time, I reached for my water cup. Thank you for coming. We spoke for 40 minutes. She asked about treatment. I answered. She asked why I kept it from her. I said, because I wanted to handle it privately. She looked wounded, but there was no accusation she could make that would not expose the larger wound beneath it. At 11:16, her phone buzzed. I saw Ivy's name. I saw the old reflex pass over my mother's face, softening it, sharpening it, pulling her attention from the room as surely as a hook. I'm sorry, she said after the second buzz. Ivy didn't sleep last night. She's very upset. I should probably go, I said. Margaret froze. I looked at the fruit basket, then at her. It's fine. It's not fine. No, I said, but it is familiar. For a moment, something opened in her face. Not understanding exactly. Recognition. A small, frightened glimpse of the pattern seen from outside. Then she smoothed it away, because my mother could fold guilt into errands. I'll call you later, she said. Okay. She kissed my forehead and left. Sebastian returned 3 minutes later with coffee he had clearly bought to give her time to exit. He looked at the empty doorway, then at the fruit basket. That is an aggressive amount of citrus, he said. I laughed. I hated that I laughed. I loved him a little for making room for it. The 2 years after that did not become a clean montage of triumph. There were frightening scans, bills that made me sit very still, and mornings when my body felt like a house under renovation. But this time, fear did not get the whole apartment. Dr. Sen was pleased, then cautiously pleased. then encouraged. Danny made spreadsheets for my appointments. Sebastian kept ginger candies in his car and learned that I hated being asked if I was okay, but could answer, "What hurts right now?" One night, 7 months after the hospital, I woke in Sebastian's apartment before dawn. I had fallen asleep after dinner, too tired to drive home. At some point, he had covered me with the blue quilt and left water on the nightstand. I woke with his arm around my waist, his breath steady against the back of my neck. For a second, panic flashed through me. Not fear of him, fear of needing the weight of that arm, fear of becoming someone who could be left. Then he shifted in his sleep and murmured, "You're okay." He was not awake. The words were a reflex. Care had entered him so deeply, it spoke before consciousness. No one in my family had ever made safety feel casual. Safety had always been a reward for usefulness, a climate that changed with Ivy's weather. But there, in the dim blue hour before morning, with Sebastian's hand warm against my ribs, I felt something I did not have a name for then. Not happiness. Happiness was too bright. Belonging, maybe. I turned carefully in his arms. He woke enough to open one eye. "Everything okay?" "Yes." "You're staring." "I'm evaluating the structural integrity of this moment." His mouth curved. "And?" "Surprisingly sound. High praise." He kissed me slowly, giving me time to refuse what I wanted. I did not refuse. The morning gathered around us, soft and gray. And for once, my body did not feel like a problem to manage. It felt like a place where I was allowed to live. We moved in together the following spring. I told myself it was practical. His apartment was closer to the hospital and the university. Mine had bad plumbing. He had more natural light. I had better knives. We combined those facts into a decision and pretended not to notice how carefully we both avoided words, like future. At work, I was promoted to lead senior project manager for a civic library renovation. My family noticed my distance slowly, as if I were a photograph fading on a wall. I still came to Christmas, brought wine, listened to Ivy, hugged my mother, helped for exactly 10 minutes in the kitchen, then went home before dessert. At the door, Margaret said, "You don't stay long anymore." "I stay as long as I want to." She absorbed that like a foreign language. Did I do something? There it was. The question too small for the answer. "You did a lot of things," I said. Her eyes filled. I did not continue. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because I was tired of doing emotional labor at thresholds. "Merry Christmas, Mom." She did not call to ask what I meant. That was the thing about Margaret. She wanted closeness, but only if it did not require excavation. Ivy's life continued in weather systems. Bad relationships, impulsive spending, a failed 6-month search for herself in another city, then a return to Margaret's guest room. Margaret absorbed the calls and loans and never once called me to say she was tired. Not until she had no choice. Margaret was 61 when St. Albans called my phone. I did not answer the first time because I was in a meeting about drainage issues. The second call came immediately after. I stepped into the hallway, heart already tightening because hospitals do not call twice with casual news. "This is St. Albans Medical Center. Am I speaking with Nora Caldwell?" "Yes." "I'm calling from the cardiac unit. Your mother, Margaret Caldwell, has requested we contact you." For a second, the hallway tilted. Not because I had never imagined Margaret sick. Everyone becomes mortal eventually. But St. Albans had a geography inside me. A bed, a window, a fruit basket, 40 minutes. "What happened?" I asked. The nurse explained with practiced calm. "A cardiac episode. Stable now, serious blockage, surgery recommended." Margaret was frightened and asking for me. I stood in the hallway of the firm where I had built a life of clean lines, deadlines, contracts, and glass conference rooms, and felt the past fold itself neatly into the present. "I'll call her," I said. When I dialed, a nurse must have handed her the phone because I heard movement, a murmur, then my mother's breath. "Nora?" She was crying before my name fully formed. "I'm here," I said. "I need you." No preface, no pride. just the raw, terrified center of it. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. They said surgery, and I don't understand half of what they're saying. Ivy isn't answering. She went to a friend's place to clear her head, and she hasn't answered in 2 days. I need someone to be here. I closed my eyes. The hallway smelled faintly of printer toner and someone's reheated lunch. Through the glass wall, my team moved around the conference table, pointing at plans, solving ordinary problems in ordinary time. My phone felt warm in my hand. There are moments when life offers revenge so perfectly shaped that taking it would feel like destiny. I could have said, "Now you know." I could have told her I had meetings, that she was strong, that Ivy needed space, that I would come tomorrow. I wanted to. Not for long. But honestly, "Mom," I said quietly, "do you remember the Tuesday I called you from St. Albans? 3 years ago?" Her crying stopped. Not all at once. It thinned into breath. "Yes," she said. "I had cancer. I was alone in that bed. I called you because I was frightened." Silence. A cart rattled somewhere on her end. A distant voice called for a doctor. The hospital lived around her, indifferent and exact. "And you told me Ivy needed you?" I said. The silence that followed was the most honest thing my mother had ever given me. She did not deny it. She did not explain that Ivy had panicked. She did not tell me she came the next day for 40 minutes with fruit wrapped in plastic. She did not say, "I did my best," the sentence people use when they want their intentions graded instead of their actions. She breathed. And in that breath, I heard something I had not understood in either life. She remembered. She had always remembered. She had carried it somewhere inside her. Not enough to change, not enough to confess, but enough to know. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was not the apology. Not yet. It was too small, too frightened, tied too tightly to her current need. But it was the first thread of it. Sebastian's name lit my phone with a text because I had sent him only 3 words before calling her. "Mom, St. Albans. Sebastian, I'm leaving the site now. Meet you there?" I typed with one hand. "Yes." Then I lifted the phone again. "I'm coming, Mom," I said. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. She made a sound. Not relief exactly. Something messier. "Thank you. I'll talk to the doctors when I get there." "Okay." "Don't hang up until the nurse comes back." "I won't." We stayed on the line without speaking for almost 4 minutes. I listened to my mother cry quietly in a hospital bed, and I did not become the woman who had left me there. That was the revenge, though I did not know it yet. Not punishment. Not abandonment, returned like a debt. The revenge was that I had survived long enough to become someone whose kindness was no longer a plea. Sebastian was waiting at the hospital entrance when I arrived. He wore work boots and had a hard hat clipped to his bag, dust on his jacket sleeve. He must have come straight from a site inspection. The sight of him standing under the St. Albans sign nearly broke me in half. He took my bag. "How is she?" "Scared. Stable. Surgery tomorrow, probably." "How are you?" I laughed once. "Efficient." That's not an answer. It's the answer I have in public. He nodded and touched my back as the automatic doors opened. "Then we'll use it until you have another one." The lobby had been renovated with pale wood panels and blue chairs meant to look calming. It still smelled the same. No designer could renovate fear out of a hospital. Margaret was in a cardiac room on the 6th floor, small under a white blanket, hair uncombed, face bare of makeup. I had rarely seen my mother without presentation. It made her look older, yes, but also younger, stripped of the habits she used to organize the world around herself. Her eyes filled when she saw me. "You came." I said I would. Sebastian stood near the door. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Sebastian." "We've met once, briefly." "The fruit basket," she said, then closed her eyes as if the words hurt on the way out. "Yes," he said gently. "That day." I moved to the side of the bed. My mother reached for my hand, then stopped, uncertain. That hesitation wounded me more than the reaching would have. We had become people who did not know the rules of touching each other. I took her hand. Her fingers were cold. The doctor came in 20 minutes later. I asked questions. I wrote down answers, blockage percentage, surgical plan, risks, recovery, medications, home care. Margaret watched me with fear, gratitude, and a grief arriving late to a room it should have entered years ago. "You're very good at this," she said after the doctor left. "I've had practice." Her eyes dropped. Sebastian stepped out to call Danny, because he knew Danny would be furious if allowed to find out late. My mother and I sat in the room with the machines and the old sentence between us. "Ivy really isn't answering?" I asked. Margaret shook her head. She said she couldn't handle hospitals. She said she needed to clear her head. I thought she'd come back after a few hours. Of course she had. Ivy's inability to handle something had always been treated as a weather event everyone else had to shelter from. "Did you tell her it was serious?" "Yes." Margaret's voice cracked. She cried. She said she felt like she couldn't breathe. Then she left. A terrible, familiar symmetry settled over us. My mother looked at me, and this time I watched her see it. Not glance near it. Not feel guilt in the abstract. See it. "Nora," she said. "Not now," I said, not unkindly. She nodded, tears sliding into her hairline. "Okay." I stayed until after midnight. Danny arrived with chargers, socks, and rage. Dad came too, bewildered and frightened, and held Margaret's hand while I explained the surgery twice. Ivy appeared 2 hours before surgery. She came in wearing sunglasses too large for her face, hair tangled under a cream beanie, carrying a coffee she had clearly bought for herself. Her eyes were swollen. She looked young, though she was 30, which was too old to look so surprised by consequence. "Mom," she breathed, rushing to the bed. Margaret's face changed automatically. I saw it. The softening, the gathering of concern, the old orbit beginning to pull. I stepped back without meaning to. Ivy clutched her hand. "I'm so sorry. My phone died. And then I couldn't. Hospitals make me panic, and Jess said I needed to regulate before I came because I couldn't help you if I was dysregulated. And I kept thinking about you dying, and—" "Ivy," Margaret said. Her voice was weak, but it cut cleanly through the room. Ivy stopped. Margaret looked at my sister for a long moment. Then she turned her head toward me. I was standing near the window, exactly where I had stood in another room years earlier, while she chose a text message over my hospital bed. "Ivy, sit down and be quiet," my mother said. "Your sister is here." No speech followed, no swelling music, no courtroom revelation, just one sentence in a room that smelled of sanitizer and coffee gone cold. But the world inside me shifted. Ivy blinked as if she had been slapped. "Sit," Margaret said. Ivy sat. I had to look away. One sentence could not return years. It could not place my mother beside my bed in my first life or erase the fruit basket from the window ledge. But it was the first time I could remember my mother choosing not to make Ivy's feelings the emergency in the room. It was the first time she had chosen me out loud. Sebastian, standing near the door, saw my face and did not move toward me. He knew better. Some moments are too fragile for comfort. They have to land first. Margaret's surgery was successful. Those words did not end the crisis. Recovery is where love becomes either commitment or decoration. The hospital discharged her 4 days later with instructions, prescriptions, restrictions, and paperwork that made my father look faint. I did not do it alone. That mattered. In my first life, I would have absorbed everything automatically and resented everyone quietly. In this one, I had learned that martyrdom was not a moral high ground. It was often just poor delegation with better branding. I made a schedule. Ivy stared at it as if it were a legal summons. "You want me to do mornings?" "I want you to do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings," I said. Dad can handle evenings if meals are prepared. I'll take appointments and medication management. Sebastian and Danny are backup for transport. The home nurse comes twice a week. I'm not good with medical stuff. Then you'll learn. She looked at Margaret, clearly expecting rescue. Margaret, pale in her recliner, said, Your sister has done enough. You can make oatmeal and check a blood pressure cuff. Ivy's mouth opened, then closed. The first 2 weeks were hard. Margaret hated needing help, which surprised me until I realized she and I were alike in that one unfortunate way. She apologized every time she asked for water, then tried to fold laundry on day 6 until I found her breathless and furious in the hallway. Sit down, I said. I am not helpless. No, you are recovering from heart surgery. Those are different categories. I hate this. I know. She looked at me then, really looked, as if hearing the echo of my recovery in my voice. Did you hate it? Yes, I said. She sank into the chair. And you were alone. Not the second time. The second time, she repeated softly. I had never told her about the first life. I never would. Some truths are too large for the world that has to hold them. But there were other truths available, and they were enough. Sebastian was there, I said. Danny, too. I'm glad. Her voice trembled. I am. I'm glad you had people. I adjusted the blanket over her knees. So am I. She caught my wrist gently before I could move away. Nora. I don't know how to say it without making it sound smaller than it is. Then don't try to make it sound anything. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. I was always afraid of your strength, she said. That sounds awful, but you were born looking at the world like you already understood the instructions. You didn't cry the way Ivy did. You helped. And I was relieved, Nora. I was so tired, and your sister needed so much, and you made it easy for me to believe you didn't. That was convenient for you, I said. Yes. She did not flinch. It was. The admission moved through me like cold water. I told myself I was respecting you, she continued. Your independence, your privacy. I told myself you would come to me if you really needed me. And when you did, I still chose the child who was louder. I looked at our hands. I don't know how to forgive that, I said. I don't expect you to do it quickly. I didn't say I would do it at all. She nodded, crying silently. I know. Over the 8 weeks of her recovery, we had conversations like that in pieces. A real conversation after decades of performance is like physical therapy. You discover how weak certain muscles are, you overdo it. You rest, you try again. Margaret told me she had known, the day of the fruit basket, that she was leaving too soon. I stood in the elevator and thought, go back, she said one rainy afternoon, and then Ivy called again, and I felt needed in a way I understood. With you, I felt guilty. With her, I felt useful. That's a terrible thing to say. Yes. But I understand it. Understanding isn't forgiveness. It just means the machinery makes sense. Ivy changed too, though not into a different person. She still complained. She still dramatized. But when Margaret stopped rearranging the world around her distress, Ivy discovered she could survive discomfort. One morning, I arrived to find her helping Margaret walk slowly down the hallway, holding the gate belt like the nurse had taught her. Later in the kitchen, Ivy washed a mug badly and said without looking at me, I didn't know it was that bad with you. You didn't ask. She winced. For once, she did not turn the wince into a performance. I'm sorry. It was not enough, but not enough is not the same as nothing. Thank you, I said. At home, Sebastian became the place where I put down what I carried through the day. I often returned after dark with my shoulders tight and my patience scraped thin. One night, I stood in our kitchen and said, I don't want to be noble anymore. Then don't be noble, he said, stirring something that smelled like garlic and tomatoes. Be hungry. Dinner's ready in 10. I went because I didn't want her to be alone, but part of me hates that I went. I know, he said. Do you think that makes me awful? He turned down the burner and came around the counter. He stood between my knees, not touching me until I leaned forward and rested my forehead against his chest. No, he said into my hair. I think it makes you honest. I wanted her to feel it, I whispered. Just for a minute. And then I heard her crying. His hand moved slowly over my back. You can want revenge and still choose mercy. The choice doesn't erase the wanting. I breathed him in, soap and heat, and the faint mineral smell of construction dust that never quite left his jackets. When did you get so wise? I'm not. I'm just less hungry than the sauce. I laughed against his shirt. He kissed the top of my head and admitted he had burned the first loaf of bread, which was why he had been trying to sound emotionally impressive. Margaret's recovery ended officially on a Thursday in late spring when Dr. Havel cleared her for light activity and reduced one of her medications. She cried in the parking lot afterward, not from fear this time, but from relief so sudden it embarrassed her. I'm sorry, she said, dabbing at her eyes. I don't know why I'm like this. You almost died. I didn't almost die. Mom, she gave a watery laugh. Fine. I almost died a little. We sat in my car with the windows cracked, warm air moving through. A dogwood tree bloomed near the clinic entrance, pink petals trembling in the breeze. I need to say it plainly, Margaret said. I turned toward her. I'm sorry I didn't come when you called me from the hospital, she said. I am sorry I left the next day. I am sorry I used your strength as an excuse to neglect you. I'm sorry I made you feel like love was something you earned by needing less. The words entered me slowly. I had wanted them for so long in another life that receiving them in this one felt almost impossible, like rain falling upward. I can't give back what I took from you, she said. I know that. No, I said. You can't. She nodded. I looked at the dogwood because looking at her hurt. I know you love me, Mom, I said. I've always known that. That was part of what made it so hard. If you didn't love me, it would have been cleaner. She made a small sound. I just needed you to show up, I said. I know. No, I need you to hear that. Not as a metaphor. Literally. I needed you to come to the hospital and sit beside me. I needed you to stay when Ivy texted. I needed to be the emergency once. Tears slipped down her face. You were, she said. I just failed to act like it. I let out a breath that felt years old. We did not hug in the car. That would have been too neat. Instead, I started the engine and drove her home. The change afterward was small, which made me trust it more. Margaret did not become an ideal mother. She still over-worried about Ivy. She still sent texts with too many ellipses. But she began calling me without needing something. She asked about my projects and remembered the answers. When Ivy interrupted, Margaret sometimes said, I'm talking to your sister. Margaret came to the opening of the library renovation that autumn. She stood beside Sebastian and Danny while I gave a brief speech, then walked through the children's reading room, touching the low shelves and soft green chairs. You did this, she said. When I answered that many people had, she shook her head. But you held it together. She looked at me, and I saw the old mistake pass through her mind. Strength as distance. Competence as absence of need. Then she said, I'm proud of you, and I hope you went home and slept for 12 hours after. It was such a small correction that I had to stand alone in the restroom for 3 minutes with my hand over my mouth. Healing did not feel like a door opening. It felt like a house being rewired while people still lived inside. There were sparks, there were outages, but the lights came on in places I had assumed would stay dark. As for my illness, I would not say I defeated it. Bodies are not battlefields to me anymore. They are homes. Mine had needed help, attention, repair. Some days it still did. I kept appointments. I took symptoms seriously. Forgiveness, if that was the word, became a practice rather than a verdict. Some days I felt only affection. Other days the old wound flashed. The difference was that now I spoke. "Mom," I would say, and she would stop. Not always gracefully, but she stopped. She looked. She corrected when she could. She apologized when she failed. We learned each other late imperfectly, with years missing from the middle. Ivy moved out eventually. She and I never became best friends. We became sisters in a more honest way, affectionate sometimes, irritated often, bound by history but no longer suffocated by it. Dad remained Dad. He loved us from his armchair, through oil changes, weather reports, and envelopes of cash he pretended were not gifts. One afternoon, while helping Sebastian fix a loose railing at Margaret's house, he said to me, "Your mother talks about you differently now." "How?" He tightened a screw slowly. "Like she's listening to herself while she does it." I thought about that for a long time. The final scene I keep returning to is not dramatic. There is no hospital monitor in it. No phone call. No choice sharpened into a blade. It is early evening on the small balcony of the apartment Sebastian and I share. The one with the ridiculous rent and the view of 3 brick buildings, one narrow slice of river, and a sky that turns peach in late summer. I am sitting in a chair with a glass of wine balanced on the small metal table. Inside, Sebastian is making dinner. I can hear the scrape of a pan, the soft thud of a cabinet closing, his voice humming something off-key and unashamed. The apartment smells like garlic, butter, and lemon. On the table beside my glass is a book I have been reading badly for 2 weeks because every time I sit down with it, life interrupts in some gentle way. I think about the hospital bed. I think about the fruit basket, the cellophane shining under fluorescent light, the pears hard as stones. I think about the 40 minutes. I think about my mother's voice years later, small and terrified, saying, "I need you." I think about the fact that for a long time, I believed the story of my life was about waiting. Waiting for my mother to notice. Waiting for Ivy to need less. Waiting for illness to become visible enough to justify care. Waiting for love to arrive in a form I could trust. But I was wrong. My life became mine when I stopped waiting at the locked door and built another house. I built it with doctor's appointments and unanswered texts, with Danny's spreadsheets and Sebastian's steady hands, with a library full of light and a kitchen where I learned to burn things without apologizing. I built it with boundaries that felt cruel until they felt like walls. Sebastian opens the balcony door with his hip, holding out a torn piece of bread. "Opinion," he says. I take it from him. The crust is warm against my fingers. I taste it. Garlic, olive oil, salt, rosemary. It needs more lemon. He stares at me as if I have betrayed him personally. Bread does not need lemon. This bread does. You've become powerful and difficult. I was always difficult. People were distracted by my usefulness. His smile softens. He leans down and kisses the top of my head. "More lemon, then." He goes back inside. I lean into my chair and look at the evening sky. My phone rests on the table, quiet. My body is tired in the ordinary way a body becomes tired after a full day of being lived in. Not abandoned, not ignored. Lived in. I am not the woman who died at 34 with a nurse holding her hand. I am not the woman who waited for her family to show up and called that waiting love. I am here, in the life I made, loved by people who learned the shape of my silence and answered it with presence. The city hums around me. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, and if this story stayed with you, I'd love to know what you would have done in Nora's place. Would you have gone to the hospital when Margaret called from the same bed years later? Or would that old wound have been too deep to cross? If you felt the hospital scene, the fruit basket, or the final balcony moment in your chest, please like and share it with someone who understands what it means to stop waiting for love and start building a life that loves you back.